In the second half of the 1960s, nonviolent marches started to appear to show peaceful protests and demonstration for certain rights. Then in the mid-1970s, activist groups of different vulnerable populations started to fade out. This was for many different reasons. Government groups such as the FBI were intimidating to these populations. As well as this, there wasn't a lot of change and it was hard for these groups to get legal assistance. During the women's movement in the 1970s, there's a lot of different policy women were trying to get changed. They wanted to end discrimination in the workforce, improve state laws regarding rape, create laws for maternity leave, and get better funding for different women's shelters. These are just a few of the things they were fighting for during the women's movement. There was also inside factors that were challenging for the movement. Women of color felt like they weren't seeing the attention they needed. They also believed more groups, like poor women, needed more attention as well. Not everyone in the women's movement had the same ideas of what exactly should be done. Older people were affected in the 1970s by different policies as well. They were affected by many different social policies, such as Medicare, the Older Americans Act, and the indexing of Social Security benefits. In the 1960s, there was an increase in the amount of people in the United States with disabilities because of car accidents and the conflict with Vietnam. There are many groups that represented certain groups of people with specific disabilities, but there weren't any organizations on the civil rights of people that had disabilities. People with disabilities were not only discriminated against in the workforce, but they were also discriminated against in day-to-day things. For example, there weren't always ramps and elevators for people with disabilities to use. In 1972, President Nixon vetoed the Rehabilitation Act. Because of this, a lot of people started supporting the legislation to ensure that people with disabilities were treated fairly. The Rehabilitation Act was enacted in 1973. This prohibited discrimination against people who had disabilities. There were also child advocacy groups that were active during this time. At this point, the United States was behind Europe in developing child care and children's allowances. There weren't always a lot of groups that were advocating for children. One of the few groups that worked to fight for child development legislation was the Child League of America. Because there weren't many groups in this fight, these activists had to get help from other groups, such as the National Organization for Women.